Hey guys, it's Caden. Welcome to another Autism Digest interview. As I've said time and time again, at Autism Digest, we're all about rounding up different perspectives on autism awareness, whether that be the diagnosed, the parent, the nonprofit leader, or the ally to the community. And today's interview is no different. He is the son of music legend Ray Charles, who you might know from hits like Hit the Road Jack and Georgia on My Mind, which is on my playlist. He's a pastor at GM Ministries in California. He's a former teacher, a former roadie, an all-around amazing person. He is Dr. Robert Robinson. Thanks for coming on, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you for having me. Truly a blessing.
It definitely is. I think a lot of people might recognize your family's name, but Charles and Robinsons, in my opinion, are really music royalty, but for those that don't know your story specifically, do you mind starting us off by summarizing that in your own words?
Well, it's hard to talk about it because when I think about my father, a lot of times people look at him as Ray Charles. But, you know, he's Ray Charles Robinson, his legal name. Growing up, of course, as a child, I knew things were kind of different. First of all, I looked at him, my father was blind. Then also noticing a lot of times he was gone and he was on the road. As a young person, I really didn't listen too much to his music until I got a little bit older. And most people, if you really look at his story, my mother was actually more famous than my father at a point in time. And you kind of see that a little bit if they see the movie Ray. She was a gospel singer, traveling and everything. And they met. And then eventually she came off a tour to take care of us. So I was raised around music. And growing up, my main thing was looking at it, he was just my dad. Until I started traveling with him, then I got more of a perspective of how big he was. You know, when he was in town, yes, we went to some of his concerts, but that still didn't click because I was into other type of music than he is. And so as I began to grow and, like I said, went on tour with him, then I realized traveling all over the world with him, how big he was, you know, worldwide, you know, and that made more of an impression, like, you know, wow, you know, so many people love his music all over the world. But the main thing with him, as I would say, is out there, Ray Charles, at home, he was just dad. And so when I look at it, his teachings and what he taught me was very inspirational as a father, because yes, you know, we looked at him like, yeah, he's blind, but if you were around him, you would never know. And my mother teaching us, like, don't treat him like he's blind. Do not treat him like that. And he would say the same thing. He would say, I'm not disabled. I just can't see. And that was his mentality. And that's how I brought up, you know, when you talk to him like he could see. You know, so your language would be, oh, Dad, did you see that? Because we would sit there, you know, we went to Laker games, the Dodger games. Now he had the radio on and was listening. And when something was happening, he's listening to Chick Hearn and I play with him like, oh, Dad, did you see that? And that's the way we talk. Did you see that play? And he'd say, yes. And so same thing, walking around the house, we didn't help him do anything. Matter of fact, he was showing us how to do a lot of things. So in my life, you know, I can ramble on about it, but the main thing was his attitude was, don't tell me what you can't do. Don't ever let that come out of your mouth. I can't, you know, do what you can do. So that was always my attitude. And then the problem is, if I would say it's a problem, that's the same way as being a pastor at my church. I tell people, I don't want to hear what you can't do, you know, because you can do something. God has given us all a gift to do something. And so that stuck with me. And I have an attitude, you know, getting up. I never say I can't. All right. So I always tell people, find a way. find a way, whatever it is, find a way. And so that's the way it was. And like I said, watching him, knowing he was blind, but watching him take things apart. He put our bikes together. You know, a lot of people, he would take, radios apart. He would take a lot of things apart to see how they worked and then put them back together and plug them in, and they would work. He did everything that you can think of, from cooking, clean, whatever you think of. So even he would drive cars. He rode my motorcycles. He rode in certain areas or in the parking lot. And you just tell him to turn, this and that. You know, he rode my motorcycle, like he would say, oh, it's 1 down, 4 up. Yep. He'll ride around. And so that's the way it was. And so seeing that, with all those types of things, it just made me like, well, I got my sight, I got everything. How can I sit up and say I can't do something? And so, and if you just read his stories, it just goes beyond, just thing, because even his record company bought him a motor scooter that he rode around. And so, he rode around in the tennis court, and that was his thing, his passion. So there was nothing, unless it was illegal for him not to be able to do it. So he did it. And so, most people didn't know he would get in the car and would drive, and he loved driving. And so it's like turn right, turn left, this and that. We did it on, streets that we're able to do it on. So he did all that, and you watch him in the studio. He worked the soundboard. He did everything. And so he was a chess master. He played chess. So, you see all that kind of stuff. They made special things for him, the chessboard and stuff. So, and another thing, last thing was growing up, he was all about education and challenging your mind. And so with us, I remember a gentleman on in the band got a Rubik's Cube, painted it all black. But what he did, on one side, he put holes in it. Another side, he put slashes in it. Another side, he put little bumps in it, mixed it all up and gave it to my dad and said, figure it out. So, to make his mind how to do it. And he was like, oh, and touching it and figure out how to do the Rubik's Cube. So to challenge the mind and all those type of things. So that's what he was about. And that's where my growing up was, education, studying, and don't ever say you can't do something. It's all about what you can do. All right.
That's so really amazing answer. I specifically like what you said about how people shouldn't treat each other like they're autistic, blind, or neurodivergent. I'm on the spectrum as well. You can tell by my speech patterns and mannerisms. And your dad's mindset, your family's mindset is exactly the same way my parents think. They don't treat me any different because I'm on the spectrum. They say there's no point feeling sorry for yourself. Oh, there's no point hating yourself for who you are. You just have to embrace who you are and continue to work hard. And those are definitely some amazing memories of your dad. My next question for you is, whether that be through your teaching career or through your time as a pastor, have you ever had any experiences interacting with the autism community that you want to talk about?
Yes, it's all around me. I have clients, with autistic kids. My next door neighbor, their child is autistic. They have a sign out there, supporting autism on their lawn. So I go over there and, they talk with me about their son. And so happily, my son, from my youngest son, from when he's a little child, a doctor said he was going to have some, developmental situation, basically with his speech and everything. So, dealing with IEPs, special ed classes, and those types of things. So, just matter of fact, he just last year, going into this year, they now just finally mainstreamed him, because he's always been in special ed with speech, and but he still takes speech classes. Matter of fact, he had one session yesterday. So being around what they call special needs, if you want to use that, and in his class, because it is special needs, there are autistic kids in there. And so one of the young ladies that's in the class talk with the parents all the time, and how they deal with it and those type of things, and being really close with the special ed teacher, and just being around the kids, and like I said, with the neighbors, and also with some of my clients, being around it. So and then dealing, it's a little bit different with my son, but I'm around it. And then with other preachers and pastors, I have friends that they have special needs, one with Down syndrome and all those type of things. So I know it's not all autism, but it all deals with the that spectrum, if you want to say. So in the ministry, it's the same thing. We just we push them, but we, in a special way, like, come on, you can do it. And sometimes frustrating. And just like now, looking at my son, I celebrate it because, for the first few years, he just basically grunted and those types of things. And they worked on his speech to now he's singing in the choir. And so he's like, Daddy, I want to sing. And so, a lot of it was like, oh, he's shy and those type of things. Well, yeah, he was shy because, he didn't really speak, and the developmental situation took a little bit longer and those types of things. So understanding it, having patience with it, but in my belief with God, we can do magnificent things, and I say everybody on this earth has a talent, some type of gift. All right. So you're looking up, and I'm like, your gift right now is just, what God has put you in this position to spread the word, about that's your gift,
I absolutely agree.
So that's the way I teach it. Everybody has something to do, so getting out there and just spreading the word about it. How can you help? And in my church, we have different organizations that we work with. So, and, I tell, there's not a person walking on this earth that doesn't have some type of challenge. All right. So what do you do about it? Like we have a lady in our church that has lupus. So we do the lupus walk. The other people that have cancer. Okay. We deal with cancer. And then we deal with special needs kids and, help with that. So it's a lot of things. And I say everybody has a job to do and a gift to do it. Just get out there and be about it. And so I really push that. And if you read part of my bio, you'll see how I came in the ministry. It was way back, in the 80s when HIV/AIDS was coming on, and it was, very scary. People didn't know about it. And the Lord gave to me to be a person that would go and visit those with AIDS and those type of things, patients, because if you read up on it, you look very young. But if you go back in those days, families didn't know what to do with a scary disease. People family members wouldn't even go see their loved ones. They were so scared they wouldn't eat off the same plate. They wouldn't do anything to go around them. And God just said, go and hug them. Let them know that they're loved. And so that's how I came into the ministry. I would go to hospitals and, visit those that were, and at that time people were dying from AIDS and those types of things. And, it was very scary. You had to go in, mask, gloves, everything like that. And I'm like, it was almost like putting on this big shield. And I was like, I'm not doing that. If God told me to do that, he'll keep me. And I just went and just hugged them and those type of things, So we all have a thing to show that love and give out to people. And that's what I teach. And it really helps, So that's kind of where my ministry is and in my teaching.
And that's a very great mindset to have. And you're absolutely right. Everyone has a gift that they bring to the table. In your case, it's honoring your dad's legacy, spreading your teachings to your church. In my case, it's completing assignments, contacting people for interviews on this platform, writing, and that kind of thing. And so that's a really beautiful perspective to have. My next question for you is going back to religion for a bit. What do you think the impact is, in the sense of religion, on families with autistic or neurodivergent family members that may have nowhere else to turn to?
It's sometimes it's a small word, but it's a big word. Faith. The saying, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. What it means is you don't know what it is. You never seen it. You never touched it, but you got to believe it can happen. All right. And believing in God and believing that he can do it. So, looking up, you have to get through, as parents, I don't know about your parents, but parents have to get over the first thing of like, why us? Why our child, and those type of things, then once you get past all that, and some people I talk to, it's like, oh, the hardship, it's like, oh, what are we going to do, and those types of things. Then you start getting into doing it. Okay, now let's get in the mode of what we're going to do. And then, as I said before, you look at, okay, my child can't do this, my child can't do that, but they can do this. And so, a lot of times this scripture gets used a lot, sometimes in the wrong way, but it says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so I was like, yeah, you can do whatever you set your mind to doing. All right. Now, some people say, well, I can't jump, 10 feet high, but you can jump, or I can't run as fast. I can't do this, but find out what you can do. You may not be as fast as writing as other people. You may not be able to speak like other people. And if you kind of listen to me, I have a speech impediment. And so, that's why it was shocking to me that I was called to be a preacher. I'm like, I mumble. When I was a child, I didn't, really speak. People say I didn't speak, but also, my mouth is kind of off. But what my parents had to deal with, I was electrocuted at 2 years old. And so my whole side of my face was burnt away. Basically, I coded. And so it's, having that. So they was like, we don't want to hear that, so there's always been challenges. And so, I had to learn how to speak, all those types of things and challenges. So when I stand up before the people, I'm like, look at me. Look what God has done for me. He took somebody like Moses. Moses had a speech impediment and made him, the messenger. I said, I'm the same one. God has taken me and made me a messenger to somebody that didn't speak, that, has a speech impediment, that was mumbling, when he was a child, to now I'm speaking and teaching. And so I guess preaching all the time, I'm telling people, once again, everybody has a gift, a talent. Work that. Don't look at other people and say, I can't do what they do. I guarantee you there's people out there that can't do what you do. All right. People, what you're doing right now, I look at and I would say to you, it was put inside of you to do what you're doing. Everybody doesn't have the strength to do what you're doing. All right. You're thinking, oh, I'm just coming on. No, everybody doesn't have that. So it was put inside of you. And I always tell them, work with talent you have. All right. So that's what I would say when I preach, I teach is, I look around and, I tell people, because being the pastor there, I said, I'm gifted in teaching, and that's always been that way. I said, but there's somebody over there that's great with kids. Everybody's not great with kids. All right. So there's some that work in the youth department. I said, that's your gift. You can work with kids. Everybody can't do that, especially all the different personalities. There's others that are good at this job. And I said, use what it's been put inside of you, the gift, the talent that is inside of you, and work that. All right. and you'll see how blessed you are. Instead of looking at, oh man, I don't have this, I don't have that. No, you have something that was given specifically for you, right?
Yeah, that's an amazing perception to have. And before I started doing this, I will say I was super scared about socializing. I was bullied in high school, as a lot of people are. That's nothing special, but add neurodiversity and autism to it, and a big target was put on my back. So I kind of lost trust in people for a while. And I realized after I entered college at 18, I'm a senior now. I realized I could use my voice and my stories to improve the situation for autistic and neurodivergent individuals in the world. And then when I started doing stuff like this, I was definitely nervous. I had to start with a friend of mine who owns a nonprofit where I'm at, which is Ohio. And from there, my confidence grew, and I reached out to more individuals. Yourself, Jesse Blaze Snyder, who's Dee Snyder's son, Brendan B. Brown of Wheat, all of these nonprofit leaders, singers, songwriters, actors. So you saying that, it definitely means a lot to me, and I'm glad I'm making an impact on you with our conversation, which leads me to my next question. How do you think your dad's story is a testament to how the disabled community and the neurodivergent community can do amazing things without letting their differences define them?
When I talk to people about my dad, different people have told his story, but I get interviewed, I talk to people. He was such an inspiration. A lot of times they look at the music, and that's why I talk about more of the stuff beyond the music, because there's, like I said, being around them, of course, I've, been around Stevie Wonder and all these other people. So I've seen blind people play, and those type of things. But then it's the other things that you see them do and, gifted. So I tell a story, if I could. When we traveled, my father had his own plane. And so we traveled on, we toured on the plane. And every year, because of course it was a huge plane. So every year, starting off the tour, just to mess with the new band members, he would be in the cockpit. And he would do all the switches, he can start the engines, do everything. And somebody in the band, just to start it off, would say, "Oh, it looks like Ray's going to fly the plane today." And he would be in there, and you can hear him talking, this is RC, 923 Romeo Charlie, he's talking to the tower, everything. He's doing all that kind of stuff. You see him with his hand on the throttles, everything. And of course, you see the new band members there, like getting real tight, and they're getting nervous. And it's like, all he's doing is from memory and knowing where the switches are and touching everything. But he was gifted like that. Of course, he wasn't going to fly, but, starting off everything and talking on the radio, he did that every year. So, like I said, then he'll come back into the back and he'll play somebody in chess and stuff. And, I say 95% of the time he was beating everybody. He was so gifted at it. He had a special, chess board. Just everything was inspiring to watch him, like I said, take things apart. I even see him take a watch apart and put it back together. So he used to say, "Bob, you know what's funny about it? They say I'm handicapped, but I've never got a handicap sticker." He's like, and he never, if you ever watched him, he never used a cane. And never had a dog, none of those type of things. And so he would just walk around, and even going on stage, he had the valet walk him on stage. He said, "I do that for the people." He said, "I can walk and do all this stuff on stage without them. Just tell me where I need to go. Tell me where the piano is." And if you watch him on stage, he would, go to different instruments to play, without anybody. He says, "I do it for the people because they get so nervous around me." And so, watching me walk and they think I'm going to fall. They think I'm going to do all this stuff. And the same thing in the house. We weren't worrying about him cooking or burning himself. He'd be in there cooking and pulling everything out. So he would say, stop saying I'm disabled. And that was his thing. I'm not disabled. I just can't see. Because in his mind, he's saying disabled means you're not able to. And he said, I just can't see. And he says, most of the people are more disabled than I am, if you want to say that. He said, because you don't use your mind because you can see, you don't think as much. You use that sense. But he said, because I can't see, I have to imagine. I have to use more of my mind. I have to. And then, of course, his ears got so sensitive, he can hear so clearly because he could not see. So his other senses came in. And that's where you have to look at. I was like, Dad, how did you hear that? Or how did you do that? And he was like, what do you mean? To him, it was just natural. And so that's what it taught me. And so my attitude, and like I said before, my attitude and what I say to the church, I don't like excuses. I don't want to hear, I couldn't do this. Why, why not? And so as you're finding out, yes, when you first start out with things, like you said, you were nervous, those type of things. But as you started going, you're like, oh, I'm able to do this, because you put your mind to it. And that's what it was about. It's just, the hardest thing is just getting up and doing. So I try to inspire people, get off your behinds and start doing. Because as I said before, there's not a person that does not have a challenge on this earth. You got something, because this outer shell that we call the flesh, this body, it's going to have some type of challenge, some type of disease, some type of disability. Something is happening with you. So what do you do about it? All right. And as I said, I deal with a lot of people that have different diseases and those type of things. My older son, he got diabetes real bad, and so really suffering from that. So I'm like, okay, you got it. Instead of complaining every day, because guess what? The rest of your life, what are you going to do about it? All right. And get about doing that. All right. So once you acknowledge the situation, get about doing, because, it's life. All right. So that's my teaching.
And it's a good one. That I absolutely agree. Everyone has their own insecurities and flaws they got to work on, or something that they're going through, not necessarily just neurodiversity or blindness or diabetes. It could be anything, but there's really no excuse not to live up to potential. All it takes is asking for help and embracing who you are. It's as simple as that. And going back to what you were saying about how I was nervous when I first started this, I could never have gathered up the strength to go to college, to interview people like you to write articles, to succeed academically without the help of my parents, who are in my corner still. We have our differences, as a lot of people do. That's just life. But one thing I respect them for is that no matter what I do, they've never given up on me. They've been more than empathetic towards my situations, and they taught me that there's no excuse to not being able to do X, Y, or Z thing. There's no excuse to skirt your responsibilities, and there's most certainly no excuse to feel sorry for yourself, because everyone has potential. And when I told them about some of the big interviews I've gotten, their jaws dropped and they wondered, how am I able to get these people? It's through networking, hard work, and feeling confident in myself. So I definitely like your teaching, and I think it's a perfect way to end this interview. Anyways, that's going to do it for this interview, guys. Thank you so much to Dr. Robinson for coming on and sharing his amazing stories. Again, it was truly a treat to have him on. If you guys want to see more amazing interviews with individuals, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Autism Digest channel. Check out our August issue that just came out by going to autismdigest.com And stay tuned for the audio file to be posted on our Spotify. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Be blessed.